Hey guys, Sean Pruitt here, president of Kingdom Exploration. One of the things that I keep hearing on the news is Shell's going to save us. Okay. The reason why the bombing in Saudi Arabia didn't increase oil prices, real simple, because we're producing Shell. We're putting our faith and our security in Shell, and that is the worst thing we can do. Let's go and watch the news here, and I'll explain further.
Tensions in focus this morning. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, telling 60 Minutes last night that tensions with Iran could lead to massive instability for global oil markets following the attacks on Saudi oil facilities. Watch.
If the world does not take a strong and firm action to deter Iran, we will see further escalations that will threaten world interests. Oil supplies will be disrupted, and oil prices will jump to unimaginably high numbers that we haven't seen in our lifetimes.
Joining us right now is IHS Market Vice Chairman Daniel Yergin. And Dan, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. You've been a student of the oil and this business for a long time, and you've studied it so much. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think the risks are certainly there. I mean, the attack that occurred recently in Saudi Arabia was unprecedented on a scale that had never been seen before. It was like a scenario had become reality. But what's so striking is the calm in the market. But, you know, the Iranians did this. They denied it, but they did it. But what's to prevent something like this from happening again?
Yeah, but Dagan has mentioned a number of times that the U.S. is in such a stronger position today in terms of its oil and production on the global stage. Right, Dagan?
I talked about it before we even got to this point, that our national security is in our energy sector.
You hear what she just said? Our national security is in our energy sector. Okay. The importance of energy is as important as our military. Okay. Now, of course, our military is the most important thing, but energy is national security. What Trump is doing is, if he could get oil prices to stabilize and stay around the $55 mark, what he's doing, he's causing instability overseas in the Middle East. OPEC, Iran, Saudi Arabia, all the countries overseas, including Russia, most of their GDP is oil. 8% of our GDP is oil, okay? So in order for every terrorist activity, 9/11, every war that has been funded overseas, it's been funded by oil. So she is correct. Energy is important. But do you see what the news anchor said before they sent it over to this lady? She's talking about Shale and talking about how amazing our oil and gas industry is doing. I'll explain further. Let's continue to watch.
And it gives us the ability to fight back against nations that hate us, that are oil producers.
Well, indeed, and you wouldn't even be able to do these sanctions on Iran that we have on their oil were it not for the growth. I mean, it is no question that the shale development has changed the strategic position of the United States.
He's correct. We went from producing 6 million barrels a day with conventional oil, and now we're producing upwards of 16 million a day. That's an extra 10 million barrels of oil a day from shale. So the only reason why we are oil dependent right now, we're a net exporter of oil. We're exporting oil. We're the kingpin. We're beating out Russia, Saudi Arabia. The reason why we have national security, oil has become an important commodity for America and the world is because of Shell alone. So we're putting all our faith in Shell. That's our safety net. That's our security. But continue to watch, and I'll explain why we can't put our faith in Shell.
It's reconfigured the oil market, and it's reconfigured the psychology of the oil market, which is why we've seen this relaxed reaction. If this had happened 5 years ago, we would have been in panic territory.
But what about the top story in the Journal this morning? One of the top stories, U.S. shale boom slows down amid worries over the oil supply. You were referring to that earlier.
Well, it got stymied at the beginning of the year because there was not enough pipeline capacity to move oil out of the Permian. That pipeline's being fixed. By the end of this year, beginning of next year, the U.S. will be at 13 million barrels a day. I think we're not going to see the incredible growth that we've had, unprecedented growth over the last several years. It will be.
Okay, so do you see how he stumbled over his words? She's like, well, you know, the shell is the output is dropping. He tripped over his words, and then he blames it on the pipeline. Look, guys, the richest people in the world are in oil. okay? And we don't have, when before shale was even an option, shale is a shale. It's hard. You cannot extract oil from a shale, okay? In order to extract oil from an oil-bearing structure, imagine a kitchen sink sponge. A kitchen sink sponge, if you take it and you set it in a bowl of oil, it will absorb the oil within seconds, and you could squeeze it and extract probably 90% of the oil in there. Why? Because a kitchen sink sponge is porous. It's like 90% porosity, okay? As where a conventional oil play, that the conventional oil plays that we've been producing from since the 30s and 40s, that's about a 15 to 20% porosity. The sandstone, you take your sandstone, it's like a hard rock, but then you throw it and it shatters against something harder. So that's sandstone. It has porosity. You can extract oil from that. And it takes very simple, inexpensive fracks, like $50,000 fracks to extract oil from it. Now, a shale, the porosity is like, excuse me, is like 2 or 3%. So you got to frack the hell out of it, like put dynamite down there, cause an explosion, cause high pressures amount of slick water and sand to burst through to break up all that shale, and then the oil can flow through freely. That's like a $5 million process. Not only that, the decline curve is massive because you got to manipulate Mother Nature to get it to produce 1,000 barrels, and then in a few months it drops down to 100. It cannot maintain those numbers, and we're putting our faith in shale. I think he has something else to say about it. He might not, but I'll skip down to the
slower
video.
growth, but the U.S. is going to continue to grow, and the rest of the world knows that.
Do you worry about a change politically if you have somebody else in the White House, that they change?
Okay, so I'm going to move on here, but do you see how they speak with confidence like Shale is going to save us? All right, so let's see what Dan Dicker has to say. This guy's been in the business for 30 plus years. He's the boots on the ground. He knows what he's talking about. And if you talk to any engineer that's in the business, that is actually boots on the ground, that actually handles the shale, that actually extracts oil, they're going to tell you a different story than what these business men in suits are telling you. They don't want to tell you the truth because they have to please their shareholders. All right, so watch here.
Shale oil is a Ponzi scheme, Dan. That's quite a statement to make because there was such an aggressive push to get this online.
Yeah, and the reason I say this is because shale oil is unique in how it's gotten out of the ground. It gives you a very front-loaded result. That's one of the reasons I liken it to a Ponzi scheme. So you get most of your oil, 50% or more of your oil inside the first year of service of a well. That's unique. So you have to...
Okay, so... Now, this video was in 2015, okay? So he said 50% of the oil produced from shale is produced in the first year. Okay, so the more wells that you drill, the decline curve is even higher because every time you drill a shale well, you're pumping millions of barrels of frac fluid inside the structure. So now they got to, for every barrel of oil, they got to produce X amount of barrels of water. And so it's getting flooded with water. It has less oil in it, and the decline curve is actually much faster than it was then. We'll
continually drill wells in order to continue to generate cash flow in order to drill more and more wells. So there's a capital rush all the time. And the first results that you get off these wells get extrapolated. So you get a lot of what you think are very good results for a company at large and the total acreage that they control based on very, very few wells and their initial results. And in all of these ways, there's a lot of capital that chases these investments, chases these oil companies. Ultimately, what you have is something that Einhorn talked about. And although I think his timing is wrong, I think some of the ideas that he puts forward in terms of enterprise and capital requirements, I think are absolutely on the mark.
Well, that's something that you and I talk about each week in terms of the poor fundamentals for crude in general, but it's almost a catch-22 because if crude moves lower, they can't drill. As it starts to move higher, then they want to turn on the spigots again, and then the supply glut just continues to get exasperated. And so
Okay, so this video was in 2015, March 28th, 2015. And so bottom line, when shale prices go up or oil prices go up, there's more shale wells being drilled. And then when oil prices go down, it shuts the companies down. And so we've been on this playing this game for the last 3 or 4 years. We've had a tremendous so these companies in 2015 were expecting oil prices to go back to '08 prices, $150 a barrel. We didn't see that because these companies didn't realize that Donald Trump was interested in economic warfare with the rest of the world. And when you keep oil prices low, it hurts Russia's economy, Saudi Arabia's, Iran, Kuwait, Venezuela, all the countries in the Middle East that cause issues. And it's all funded by oil. So we could send American troops in, spend trillions of dollars on war, and kill millions of people, or we could stay back in the comfort of our own country and produce a bunch of oil. And that's what we're doing. But what Donald Trump and the administration does not understand is the fact that we cannot put faith in Shale because they're getting their data from these multi-billion-dollar oil companies, okay? Donald Trump is a real estate tycoon, but oil is completely different. I've been investing in oil for the last 25 years, and I understand that the news doesn't know what they're talking about. And the engineers, the boots on the ground, they do. They do. Look up Mark Berman. Look up Dan Dicker. There's so many names I could give you. But let's, if you look here, Friday, August 30th, 2019, oil and gas company bankruptcies rise as Shell investment slows. Bankruptcies are rising among American oil companies as Wall Street's disaffection with Shell companies reverberates through the industry. So there's a lot of oil companies shutting down, and it's increasing. If you look here, the North American drilling activity still in free fall as another 12 rigs exit the U.S. patch. I believe that there was 169 units last year dropped, and I think another 100 dropped this year. But it's only going to continue to get worse out there, guys. The shell industry is dying. The shell industry cannot maintain the current prices. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. Okay, Saudi Arabia has their problem. Okay, they are doing whatever they can to try to take their Saudi Aramco public. Okay, a pre-IPO. They couldn't even raise more than $100 billion, which is nothing for a $2 trillion potential stock, twice as much as Apple. Okay, and so they can't even raise money for this thing right now. They are desperate. Iran is starving, and they only make money from oil, along with Saudi Arabia, Russia. 8% of our GDP is oil, and 90% of their GDP is oil. And so economic warfare 101, take their money. And so that's what Donald Trump is doing. Very intelligent man. And so what's happening is that Iran dropped a bomb in Saudi Arabia. Well, originally that would have been jacked up oil prices. Well, the reason why it hasn't, because all the speculators, all the investors, all of the analysts, everybody is saying, oh, hey guys, don't freak out. Shell is going to save us. Shell is going to protect us. Shell is going to last forever. Guys, Shell, it's impossible. It's impossible to maintain the output. I think the EIA reported, the Energy Information Administration reported that we've dropped 250,000 barrels of oil a day over the last several months, and it's going to continue to drop. But nobody's ready to admit to it because the guys that the smartest people in the room work for multi-billion-dollar energy companies, and they're sitting in the room and they're having conversations like this. Look, guys, we cannot continue to produce shale at these prices. Our companies are falling apart. And the lawyers in the room and the CEO, the CFO, and say, hey, listen, we can't tell this to our shareholders because if we do, we're going to go out of business. All right. So tell them this. And so they got these sophisticated lawyers that know how to lie legally, and they know how to pull the blinders over the eyes of the American people. And they don't know what they're talking about. It's almost like global warming. Okay. Now, I'm not a fan of global warming. You might agree with it, you might not. But here's the thing. When somebody comes up and says, hey, Shale is going to be here forever, Shale is going to save us, I just automatically think global warming. It's completely fabricated. It's completely it is ridiculous. Read the book Shale Boom or Shale Boom, Shale Bust. Okay. And so we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Well, Saudi Arabia is actually, because Iran is going to continue to keep dropping bombs in Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is begging America to help them. And Donald Trump wants to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia so they could defend themselves, so we could not only save trillions, but we can make billions off these sale. But the problem is Saudi Arabia is broke. They haven't saved any money. They need minimum $80 a barrel in order to break even. They're losing their butts. And so we're going to continue to see escalation overseas because these guys have been manipulating oil prices since the Yom Kippur War. We helped Israel during the Yom Kippur War. Saudi Arabia, it upset them, so they cut us off from oil. Oil prices tripled 300%. Okay, and then they're like, "Wow, look at this! We could sell less oil and make much more money." Light bulb goes off, and so they've been manipulating oil prices ever since. They curb production, oil prices go up, they sell less oil and make more money. But now they can't because we're producing more oil. Shale, we went from 6 million a day to 16 million. That's an extra 10 million a day. We don't need Saudi's oil anymore. That's an extra 10 million a day, and Saudi Arabia produces like roughly 11, 12 million a day. So that's why we don't need their oil anymore. Okay. And in the past, if we had a bomb in Saudi Arabia, oil price would have went up to $300 a barrel. So every time they curb production, and they have a joint agreement with OPEC and Russia, and they curbed it 1.3 million a day, and guess what? Oil prices didn't go up, but we took market share. They sold less oil, and we sold more. And so long story short, guys, Saudi Arabia is losing money. Russia is losing money. Iran is broke. All of these countries are going broke. It's all a part of the economic warfare, and we are winning. But here's the thing. We cannot maintain this output from Shale. Companies are going bankrupt because they can't make money at 50-something a barrel. We cannot continue to pump at these rates because oil decline, Shale decline curve is massive. A conventional oil well could produce for 5-10 years before it starts to decline. Shale starts declining day one, and in 6 months, it's down to 10% of what it originally produced. So, guys, I'm Sean Pruitt, president of Kingdom Exploration. If you have any questions, give me a call. Thanks.